Well, thank you. All that stuff you heard him read about what I've been doing since 9/11 is just a simple way of saying I don't have a multi-million-dollar media budget and I needed to educate people about Sikhs, so this is the way it happened. I think what we talked about doing is having a kind of a Sikhism 101 for those of you that aren't familiar with Sikhs. But also this is just kind of a free-form discussion. I don't give lectures, I have discussions. So I think it's important to start and just refer to what my introducer was referring to was the most recent unfortunate tragedy in our community was the shooting in Wisconsin of 6 innocent Sikhs that were just going to worship on Sunday. Unfortunately, this is not the first time since 9/11 in particular that Sikhs have suffered behind the ignorance and hatred. And Sikhs often find themselves standing side by side with the Muslim community trying to educate people in America because people know, in America they know quite a bit about Christianity, at least most denominations of Christianity. They know a bit about Judaism, and they really don't know much about anything else culturally and religiously. So, and this is the majority. For those few that have educated yourself about the world, you know, I'm not talking about you. So, it's been very important since 9/11. Pretty much before 9/11, I'd retired from representing the Sikh community and doing all the public speaking and doing all the stuff that I'm back doing now. And the simplicity of what happened after 9/11, the hate reaction in this country, was something that I just couldn't personally bear. And I think a lot of us couldn't bear the way. I couldn't bear it from two different angles. Number one, it was a resounding reaffirmation that nobody in America knew what a Sikh was. So as a Sikh, I didn't think that was right. But as an American, I was completely embarrassed of the level of ignorance that people have in our country culturally. I mean, it's shameful in a way. So what do you do when you have a person who's not educated? You can laugh at them, you can ridicule them, or you can educate them. Personally, my path is the third one. You know, it doesn't do any good to mock people who are ignorant. They don't learn anything from it. Educate people. So since 9/11, many of us in the Sikh community have kind of taken any door we can open to try and reach out and touch people. And I don't care if you don't like me because I'm a Sikh, but just don't shoot me because you think I'm Osama bin Laden. It just doesn't work. It's not smart. So how many people in the room are familiar with something about Sikhism besides Steve? Steve is, do all you know Steve? Steve is a very good friend of mine from the LDS Church who actually went to India with me. Is it 2 years ago now?
Yeah, almost. Yes.
Almost 2 years ago. Went to India because he was so determined to learn about Sikhs that he caught me and my wife when we were going, and we took him and his wife with us on one of our normal annual trips to India. And they actually learned a lot. They went to the Golden Temple, which is the Sikhs' holiest shrine. They made food and served it to people at the Golden Temple. Sikhs are into feeding people. And you may have heard this in describing Wisconsin, that every Sikh Gurdwara has community meals and community kitchens. Well, at the Golden Temple, there's a free kitchen that feeds, on an average day, 80,000 people for free for a day. And Steve and his wife, actually, she made some of the food, and he served the food as they come in and out, and people would eat. So you'll have to ask him about his impression of that someday. But it was very, very wonderful and amazing to see some of my interfaith brothers and sisters that are doing this. Okay, so nobody knows anything about Sikhs besides Steve? You guys have never seen people with turbans and beards before? Everybody has. Where did you think? Why do you think they were dressed like that, or why do you think they were attired like that? This is where you interact. You can actually answer me. So you've seen a person with a turban and beard walking down the street. What did you think? Muslim, right? What was your thought?
Sikh.
Sikh. Oh, see, you do know. You just weren't speaking up. You know something about Sikhs. But the truth is, I'd say 98, 97%, I used to say 99.9% of nobody in America knows what Sikhs are. Through the tragedy of Wisconsin, more people have heard about the Sikh community in a very sad way, but in a way, you know, we try to use every tragedy to our advantage too. But still, most people have no idea what Sikhs feel, what they believe, you know, or you know, who they are and why they practice, why they keep their appearance, why they do all these things. And as you can imagine, since 9/11, there have actually been more violent hate crimes against Sikhs than there have against Muslims after 9/11, simply because of our religiously mandated appearance. So, what do you know? Do you know a lot about Sikhs? Sikhism, anybody know when Sikhism began and how it began? Yes, sir.
Well, I never heard of the Sikhs until 9/11, when Muslims then became in the news, and then
Right.
and then it was said that the Sikhs believed in some descendant of Muhammad, but not Muhammad or something of that sort. I'm not sure.
Yeah, see that again is you know, people kind of make up information when they don't have it sometimes, but actually Sikhism has
I don't know.
aside from the fact that we're a monotheistic faith, has very little to do with Islam.
Yeah.
It's its own unique practice with its own unique scriptures.
Okay, but I don't think I've ever seen a Sikh before.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, that's possible. That's possible. But there's about 600,000 Sikhs in the U.S.
Okay.
About 180,000 in California. It's the most populous state for Sikhs. But Sikhism was founded, I actually have a PowerPoint, I didn't know you had a projector, but we'll do without the graphics tonight. Sikhism was founded about 500 years ago in northern India in an area called the Punjab. Who's here has been to India before? Okay, you been to the Punjab? Or did you stay mostly in southern?
Southern and eastern, but not western.
Okay. Oh, so you went to Calcutta? Yeah. Sikhism was founded in the Punjab area, which is what is now Pakistan and part of northern India. When India was granted independence by the British in 1948, 47 and 48, for many different reasons, the British allowed or divided off part of the Punjab and northern India and made it and allowed it to become its own Muslim state, which is Pakistan. Unfortunately, this is 2/3 of what the Sikh homeland was. So during partition, the majority of the Sikh families were driven out because Pakistan was going to be a Muslim state, and it is a Muslim state, and it's, you know, it's a very profound Muslim state. And you find that people here in America actually know very little about Pakistan too. They think Pakistan's been around forever. They never realized it was part of India for millennia until it was divided off into the separate state. But anyway, Sikhism was founded in the Punjab about 500 years ago by a teacher named Guru Nanak. And Sikhism actually has 10 gurus or 10 enlightened beings that originated the faith, living ones. When the 10th master, Sri Guru Gobind Singh, knew he was going to die, he actually gave the guruship, the leadership of the Sikhs, to the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh scriptures. So if you go into a Sikh Gurdwara, one of the first things you see at the front of the room is a throne-like object with the scriptures sit on it. And people come in and they bow in respect to the scriptures, but they're not bowing to a book. They're bowing to the wisdom and the God-inspired teachings within the book. And actually, to Sikhs, we treat our scriptures as a living teacher. So when the 10th Sikh Guru gave the guruship to the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh scriptures, he said all the knowledge and inspiration that a Sikh needs to be a good Sikh and to live his life in a spiritual way is here. And that's what that's what the living gurus always taught. And actually the Sri Guru Granth Sahib is an interesting animal in itself. It's actually a compilation from writings of the majority of the Sikh gurus, but also from other saints of the time. So there's actually writings from a Hindu, a Muslim, and Sufi saints in the Sikh scriptures. Why? One very fundamental thing. Sikhs don't believe we have an exclusivity license on God. We believe God created everybody, created all the major religions as different ways to relate to God and to worship God, and we believe they're all valid. So if you relate to God, if you believe in God, great. Find it in your own heart how you're going to do it. And Sikhs have died over the years fighting to protect people's freedom and right to choose what faith they should follow. You know, I have a lot of discussions with my Christian brothers and my Jewish brothers and Muslim brothers and everybody else, and they always, especially the more evangelical ones, they seem to come up with the thought, well, you know, everybody should be this way. And my argument is, well, if God, we all agree in different faiths that God is all powerful, pretty much, right? God does what he wants to do, creates us, does everything. So the question is, if he wanted just one religion, don't you think he could have managed it? And the reality is, of course, you know, with the real evangelicals, well, you're just created to believe what you believe so I can convert you. But that's not what we believe. We believe that there are different ways, different dimensions almost of relating to God. And that I have a relating to God that works for me, but it might not work for you, so you have to choose and find the way that works for you. And this is a core value of Sikhism, is religious freedom, every kind of freedom. And so anyway, Guru Nanak originated the Sikh faith, and he was actually a Brahmin, a high-class Hindu, in India that had a tremendously oppressive caste system. Now here they tell you that they don't really have a caste system in India anymore, but it's really not true. They have a class caste system, and it's not legally. There it was authoritatively, legally enforced, where if you were an untouchable and you hung around or walked or even looked at a Brahmin, you'd be arrested by the police. Well, they don't do that now, but there's still a serious caste system where communities, you know, punish and react and do this whole thing about, you know, what they believe their class is. Anyway, Guru Nanak taught against that. He taught that if we're all created by the same one God, which we all believe, how can one be above or beneath another? That everybody's created equal. And one really profound thing he taught in India at the time was that not only are women equal, which at that time they're treated more like property than people for the most part, that women are the most important part of the society, because without women there is no society. We don't have babies, guys, you know, and they haven't started making them in test tubes. So if it wasn't for the women in our community, there would be no community. And if you treat those women with grace and respect, they're going to raise children that have grace and respect, and that live life in a more authentic and giving and respectful manner. So Guru Nanak basically said there is no caste system. Okay? It doesn't make sense. And those that followed Guru Nanak also denied the caste system. So what happened is the word Sikh itself, actually it's pronounced Sikh. But in America, Sikh means something else besides someone who's seeking to learn. The word Sikh actually means someone who seeks divine knowledge, seeks to learn. And those that followed Guru Nanak were called Sikhs of Guru Nanak, the students, those that sought to learn from Guru Nanak. And later it was just abbreviated to Sikhs, because they didn't know what else to call them. They couldn't call you a shopkeeper class. They couldn't call you an untouchable because you denied all that. So they had to have some category. So that's where Sikhism began. Guru Nanak was succeeded by 9 more Sikh gurus, all which added different attributes and different qualities to the practice of Sikhism, to the Sikh faith. And culminating in the 10th Sikh guru, who actually was the reason. Well, let me backtrack a little. Anybody know much about the history of India? Before the British took over, who ruled India?
There were some kings.
All kinds of.
The Mughal Empire.
There was no one, there were many scattered little kingdoms.
Well, there were princedoms, but they were all actually ruled by the Mughal emperors, who were from Turkey, Iran, from that part of the world. The Mughal Empire grew, went into Afghanistan, northern India, and they ruled India for almost 900 and some years.
You mean Mongolian?
Mughal.
Mughal?
Mughal, that's not a studio executive
No,
or
are we
something on a
talking
ski
about-
slope. It was
Are we
actually...
talking about Mongolian people?
No, not Mongols, Mughals.
Mo-
Look it up online. It's a real interesting history.
You mean
And that-
Genghis Khan?
No,
Genghis Khan?
no. Emperors like Akbar, Khan, Aurangzeb, All these emperors that ruled India were actually from areas near Persia and Turkey and this area, and that's where the Mughal Empire spread. It became like, in a way, the Roman Empire. They never really conquered back into Persia much because the Persians kept them off, so they expanded eastward into India, Afghanistan, and that area. Anyway, for years the Mughal Empire ruled India, and they were a little bit tyrannical here and there depending on the emperor, but towards the end, the emperors decided it was their mission to convert all of India to Islam. And it was actually, at one point, they were slaughtering people who refused to convert. And it was Guru Gobind Singh, actually Guru Gobind Singh's father, stood up and told the Mughal emperor that this isn't right, there has to be religious freedom, and that if you don't stop, we're going to stop you. And his emperor laughed at him and said, I'm the most powerful man in the world, I got the biggest army, who's going to stop me? And he beheaded the ninth Sikh Guru for standing up and not converting and doing this whole thing. And it was Guru Gobind Singh who fought with his armies against the emperor that eventually drove him out of power. Anyway, because of that fighting against religious intolerance, Sikhs became known as strong fighters, as very courageous fighters. And then when the British took India, they employed a lot of the Sikhs, like they employed the Gurkhas and stuff in World War I and World War II, and in fighting different things for the empire. So there were 10 Sikh Gurus originated. Sri Guru Granth Sahib is now actually technically the Guru and the teachers of the Sikhs. We don't have a hierarchy in Sikhism of deacons and ministers and bishops and all this stuff. It's more like Islam, where everybody's responsible for their own relationship with God. That it's important that you have a relationship with God. But I should stop and ask a question. I'll let you ask a question now. Over what I've talked about so far. Questions, please. Yes, ma'am.
It
Next.
isn't exactly what you talked about, but does Sikhism have dietary rules, like foods you can eat or cannot?
Well, it's funny. Father Alexei, how are you? It's funny. Sikhism, we have what we call a list of protocols called the Rahat Maryada. And it's the protocols of how a Sikh is supposed to live his life. The only dietary restriction is, and this comes from the politics of India at the time, is that Sikhs aren't supposed to eat halal. For the
They're
only
not supposed
reason
to eat halal.
that it's not supposed to be a ritual. We're not supposed to believe in ritual, even though we're loaded with them as a religion in the community these days, like we all seem to evolve into. But it was because Guru Nanak didn't believe in ritual, so there shouldn't be ritually slaughtered. But it had more to do with the politics at the time in India. So there are many Sikhs. Like I'm an Anglo-Sikh. I'm not Punjabi. The vast majority of Sikhs are Punjabi. I adopted the Sikh faith more than 40 years ago, and I have kept as a vegetarian since then, because American Sikhs, those of us that you see walking around in white and stuff, we had a Sikh yoga teacher who, most of the yoga students didn't adopt Sikhism, but many of us did. And because we did yoga and practiced meditation, we're vegetarian. So we're kind of, first of all, you never want to consider a Sikh to be a Hindu. It's not necessarily offensive, but it's inaccurate, and people can get a little ruffled by it, especially since we've had so much trouble with the Indian government and the Hindu-dominated blah, blah, blah. But so the vast majority of people in the Anglo-Sikh community are vegetarians. And even I've found in the Punjabi community, the more religious and the more spiritual people are, the more they tend to be vegetarian. And there's different reasons for this. A lot of people think because you're not eating meat and you're not all hyped up, it's easier to sit and meditate. It's healthier for you. It's better, for the environment. It's blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yes, sir.
And how important is having a beard?
Well, I'm going to get into that. That was my next topic, is to talk about what articles of faith. Our uncut hair is actually an article of our faith. So if you're an observant Sikh, you don't cut your hair. I'm what we call an Amritdhari, a baptized Sikh. So I'm like committed. I've made a conscious commitment in my life that I'm going to do certain things every day as being a Sikh and not fudge on it. Okay? Actually, Sikhs who are Armadari baptized Sikhs, we also say 5 prayers a day. 5 basic ones. We can do more, and we don't have set times like in Islam where we pay, and we don't necessarily face, we don't face the east. But if you're an Armadari, if you're a baptized Sikh, you recite at least these basic 5 prayers per day. And you also have made certain commitments, which the hair and different symbols of faith, which I'll explain to you, remind you to keep every single day. So, the turban is actually an identity point and a respectful article of religious significance to Sikhs. And if you're an observant Sikh, you never as a man, you never remove your head covering in public. Kind of like the hijab. This is something that's done in the privacy of your own home with your family. But if you're with people that are strangers to your family, you always cover. Well, it's the same thing with the Sikh guy in his turban. So, yes, sir.
Excuse me, I came too late. I'm sorry, I missed.
You didn't miss that
the main
much.
portion of the speech that you have given. I'm not sure. I'm just wondering now. Is there any relationship between Krishna, Holy Krishna, and Sikh?
No, Krishna is, well, see, when the British took over India, they didn't understand Vaishnavites and Shivites and the many different yogas and practices and relationships that the Indians had with God. So they called them all Hindus. So for the Hindu Kush, because that was India, okay? So it's like calling Native Americans Indians, but they're different tribes and they have different practices, and anyway. So, no, I mean, we don't, that's not part of our practice to relate to Lord Krishna, but there's no reason why you wouldn't if you wanted to. It's not really a part, it might irk some of the other members of the Sikh community because we're trying to, if you talk to the Indian government half the time, well, Sikhs aren't really Sikhs, they're really Hindus. And Sikhs have never thought of themselves as being Hindus. They think of themselves as being pretty universal, so we accept Hinduism and all those different things, but we'll never identify as a Hindu. And, and again, we go back to the complicated thing, what is a Hindu? Father Alexi studied into it, and Steve has studied into this to a certain degree. It's like, well, you're a Hindu. Well, do you relate to Hanuman? Do you relate to Lord Krishna? Do you relate to Shiva? Do you relate to Durga? Do you relate to, it's just such a diverse set of practices that it's really unjustly lumped into one thing.
So years ago we used to see that they used to gather, they shaved their hair, and they played music, especially here.
Yeah, that's ISKCON. That's the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
That's Krishna.
Yeah, that's what we tentatively call in America the Hare Krishna movement.
Okay.
It was started by Swami Prabhupada Devananda back in the 60s when a lot of spiritual teachers came from India, which is by coincidence at the end of the 60s when the yoga teacher that I studied from and that inspired me to be a Sikh, defined Sikhism, also came at that time. There was TM, who was it, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, there was Swami Satchidananda, there was Swami Prabhupada, there were all these different Eastern teachers came, and I can tell you a lot about that time in America. Why the youth was looking for something that wasn't in materialistic. As a matter of fact, I joke with a lot of my friends in India, is that, you guys are spending all your time in India trying to come to America to gain more materialism, and we've thrown the materialism away and gone to India to try and get spiritual. Somewhere we got to find this in the middle, because too much material and too much spiritual doesn't work. There has to be a balance. But no, that was primarily the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. And they still have a pretty strong movement. It's not quite as visible as it used to be because they're not in the airports, but they're at Venice Beach, and they're in different places. They still have their celebration of the chariot that they go down Venice Boardwalk and stuff.
Well, no, you don't shave your hair.
No, we do the opposite. We believe, as a Sikh, we believe we don't cut our hair because God intended it to be this way, intended it to be long. And we don't fuss with that because of vanity or anything. See, that to us is a demonstration of renunciation. It's the same thing with many Buddhists. They renounce the materialism by becoming monks and shaving their heads. They still participate in life. But in Sikhism, we're just the opposite. We believe that it's the greatest worship to God, that we came here to participate and go through what you go through on this planet. So we're going to go head on to it and just bring God with us. That's why we marry. We're not celibates. That's why we have families, we have jobs, we participate in middle class society, we do everything.
So if you don't cut your hair, you don't believe in circumcision either?
Circumcision is not part of it, believe it or not, but I'd say the vast majority of Sikhs are not circumcised. But there's nothing religiously involved in that. There's nothing that wouldn't say you couldn't or could or should. So.
I think the point is staying as possible as in the form that God created you. With
Yeah.
hairs and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. I mean, we believe this has certain. We believe the man's hair covers his chin because it's his moon center. It makes him less emotional, hopefully more logical. And Father Alexei is extremely logical. But anyway, yeah, that is the reason behind it. And from that, yes, sir.
Could you say a few words as to how you became a sheik?
Exactly. Yeah.
Sikh. There's a big difference.
Sikh.
Sheik is actually a manifestation of the word sheikh, which is a Middle Eastern
Right.
elder in their religious community.
Because you're talking such fluent English without your turban and beard.
Amazing,
I would
isn't it?
recognize you, but
Well, that's because you have certain qualifications that you need to expand in your assumptions about people's appearances, and that's not a bad thing. I tell you something, in America, in the world, our technology has far eclipsed our social skills. We're living next door to people we never would have known 20 years ago. I got off a plane from London and Hong Kong just a couple days ago, and I'll probably have to go back. I was in India in July, I was in London and Hong Kong in August, and God knows where I'm going to have to go tomorrow. But the reality is we as human beings can no longer suffer under the ignorance and the fear of each other. If we do, it's going to be cataclysmic. Because as intelligent human beings, we've also figured out how to completely destroy ourselves if given the chance. We're not little tribes in little corners fighting with swords and bows and arrows anymore, where the damage may have been horrific, but it wasn't cataclysmic. Now a few people get in the wrong mood and press the wrong buttons, it gets real serious really fast. So, as human beings, we need to learn this. We need to get to know each other. We need to be able to keep our identity and still respect the other's identity. And, to the effect that we do that, we'll grow spiritually and as people. And to the effect that we don't, we'll suffer until we grow spiritually, people. It's just the way it's going to work. It's not going to change. That's the path we're on as a species. So, yes, ma'am.
2 questions. Do you use Western medicine?
Yeah.
And
Matter of fact, there are a lot of Sikh surgeons and doctors in the hospitals.
why such a great percentage in California?
This is originally where Sikhs came from India. They came in the late 1800s to work on the railroads. And they also, when they came here just as immigrants, they found that Sikhs in India are prolific farmers. In the small state of the Punjab, which is probably about the state of Ohio relative to the United States, they grow 70% of the food that's eaten in India.
Whoa.
Anybody know how many people live in India?
Billion?
1.2 with a B billion. And in India, India's an interesting place. There's 4 times as many people as the U.S. and 1/3 the space. So think about that.
So it's not Gujarat, that's the garden of India?
Gujarat?
The vegetable garden of India, it's Punjab?
The region.
Well, no, if you ask the Gujaratis, I'm sure they'd say that. If you ask the Punjabis, I don't know what they'd say these days. It's been a tough time in India for because of the persecution from the government, which started actually from the 70s and 80s. India was very pro-Russia, pro-communist, and the Sikhs were very pro-Western. So if you put that chemical mix together, it didn't work out real good, and the Sikhs started getting persecuted pretty hard. So, yes?
After the tragedy in Wisconsin, a lot of what I heard about and read about Sikhs was that it's very much a religion of peace, peacefulness, tranquility, balance, all these wonderful
Hopefully,
things.
yeah.
Just wonder if you could say more about that, and how do you reconcile that with Pakistan and India and everything else?
Well, you know, it's a funny story. We do. As a Sikh, we believe in peace. We promote peace. We'll use every peaceful means to resolve a conflict. But we also believe in social justice. Social justice means that there's such a tremendous injustice that's harming so many people, I can't just stand there and watch it happen without trying to stop it. Which means we'll use every peaceful means to try and resolve a conflict or a bad situation. If it doesn't work, it is righteous within our little thought to take up the sword and stop it. And not by hating your enemy, just hating what he does and stopping it. And if you have to use lethal force to do that, unfortunately, that's the situation.
And that's
So.
basically what the Western point of view is. Live in peace, but if you
Hopefully,
try
on
to
a
take
good
that
day,
away
yeah.
from me, we'll fight you.
On a good day, yeah. Things get muddled and confused these days in America, but you know. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry I missed it. What's the population of the Sikhs in entire world?
In the entire world, about 26 million. It's actually the world's 5th largest religion in front of Judaism. You know, I was surprised when I first, after 9/11, I started getting the numbers. In fact, there's like 13 or 14 million Jews in the world. Jews have great PR. When something happens to a Jew in this country, everybody knows about it, and they should. And no injustice should happen to any person. But, you know, if something happens to a Sikh, they say, oh, a Sheik? You know? And that's something the Sikh community needs to learn from the Jewish community, is how to stand up, because in the East, a person who complains about what happens to him is almost treated as badly as the person who commits the act against them. It's socially and culturally not polite to complain. So you have a lot of bootstrap people in communities that just kind of suck it up and go on. But in America, the squeaky wheel does get the grease. So you have to learn a whole nother way of, and this is why it's better for me and why it's easier for me to excel at doing this, because I live in both worlds. I understand both cultures. And I understand how to talk to the Western mind, and I understand how to talk to the Eastern mind. And they're really not so very far apart. They just have different ways of communicating and identifying things. So, yes?
Are Sikhs conscientious objectors to the military?
One may be, if he chooses.
Okay, but it's not.
But not as a rule, no. Yes?
Did you convert from another religion? Did you ever have, were you a Christian before, a Jew or a Muslim?
I was actually a Missouri Synod Lutheran. Anybody know how conservative that is? I mean, I was taught in catechism class that anybody outside the room is basically going to hell, and I was in deep trouble too. So, you know, the reality is, and whether that had anything to do with me slingshotting back to a religion that accepts everybody, I don't know. I don't think so. That came more from being a hippie in the 60s. You know, I went right from, you know, the hippie movement in the beginning was actually a spiritual movement. It wasn't about sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the beginning. We were searching for a deeper sense of spirituality, a sense of God and peace and everything. And once we learned that LSD wasn't going to do that, as I say, Father likes it only takes us out past Mars, it doesn't take us to God. You know, a lot of us started practicing more all-encompassing spiritual paths. Many converted to Islam. Many Americans did. Many converted. The Hare Krishna movement became part of it. Sikhism, you know, started to grow. Kundalini Yoga, out of Kundalini Yoga. People were looking for something that was more than a theory about God. They wanted a practice about God. And, you know, in Sikhism, Islam, Buddhism, all these things are daily practices. They're not just you go to church on Sunday and you think about it. So, I'm going to skip on to a couple more things so we don't run out of time before I cover a couple things. With the hair, observant Sikhs maintain 5 articles of faith on their being. Now, they don't have to be baptized Sikhs like me. They can observe at any level they wish. And different Sikhs will keep their observancy at different levels. But if you're purely observant, you keep 5 articles of faith. We call these, because in Gurmukhi they all begin with a K, we call them the 5 kakas, the 5 Ks. And the first one is kesh, uncut hair. And we don't cut our hair, like I said, because we believe this is the way God made us and we shouldn't alter that. We shouldn't mess with it. We're organic in that way. We don't want to enhance it, change it, or try to fix it in our own way. Second would be a cut. Now, if you see people, even Sikhs that cut their hair, usually almost always maintain their cut. And what this is, this represents my commitment to God. Every time I look at it, it reminds me that I must act in a righteous fashion. It's my wedding ring to God. This is my level of commitment to my wife. I have a commitment there, and I won't break it. And this is my commitment to God. They both, when I look at them, when other people see it, they see I'm married, and I should be acting married, right? When I see it, I'm married, and I remember to act married. You know, and every moment of every day. And it's the same thing with the kata. It reminds me that I'm one in part with God, and that I don't want to be separate from God in any way, and that I have to remember that at all times. And if people learn to understand who Sikhs are, they'll see that I'm wearing this. They'll realize I have some semblance of spirituality. Number 3 can be the kacheras. We wear a special type of underwear. Also, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they wear it for somewhat similar reasons, to represent modesty, chastity, purity in your relationship with your wife, not to be promiscuous. In other words, you better think before you take them off for any reason. There was also another reason that Sikhs always had to be, during the time of oppression, Sikhs always had to be ready to fight. There was a time when the Mughal emperors put a bounty on the head of every Sikh in India. And one of the reasons we're so confirmed in our articles of faith and our appearance is that Sikhs were cutting their hair and taking their turbans off so they wouldn't be killed. Well, the Guru said, no. I don't care if you don't want to be a Sikh, but don't call yourself a Sikh if you run away from adversity. Because adversity is what we come here to challenge yourself with in our talent. That's what we believe. So anyway, it was supposed to keep clothed at all the time in case you had to jump up and fight. Nobody wants to fight naked, right? So that's 3. Number 4 is going to be a kanga, a comb, usually a wooden comb. Most of the time we wear it up in our turban, under our top knot. I do have long hair. It's kind of receded a little bit over the years, and I'm kind of, subject to the same genetic influence that many others are. But we tie our hair up on top of our head under a knot before we tie our turban. Kanga represents cleanliness and respect for the body temple. In India, you have a lot of what we call sadhus and renunciates that have given away all their material possessions. They don't want to be involved in life. They don't want to be part of life. They don't bathe. They don't comb their hair that often. And to them, this is they're denouncing life to get closer to God. Well, that's fine for them, but that's not what we do. We're in the midst of it. We participate in life, so it's important to be clean and groomed. And number 5 is the kirpan. And this is actually a very important symbol for Sikhs. And I carry this everywhere I can, except for on airplanes, obviously. Okay? This to us represents social justice. It's the sword of God. It reminds me that, as an example I commonly use, if I'm walking down the street and I see a woman being attacked, I can't turn my head and go home and say that's none of my business. I have to intervene. If I can't intervene successfully physically, I'll call the cops. I'll throw rocks. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm always going to draw my kirpan, yell charge, and running into the middle of what's going on. Believe me, a kirpan is a religious symbol. In the age of AK-47s and 9mm with 15 rounds in the clip, it's not that great a weapon. But it means something very important to us, that we can't turn our back on that level of injustice. When someone's being gravely harmed, we have to try and do something. It's our obligation. So, those are the 5 symbols of Sikh faith that at least you needed to walk away with that. So yes, now we go back to questions.
Those for women too?
It's exactly the same for women.
So
Women
they
do
also-
everything equally, completely. Father Lexi knows. He's
They
shaking
have
his
a
head.
kirpan too?
If they're Armadari especially, they can wear it even if they're not baptized Sikhs, but women go through the same baptismal ceremony as men. They keep all the same symbols of faith. As a matter of fact, on Facebook, there was a woman who was hormonally not too kind from God, and actually she had a pretty good mustache and a beard, but she was very proud to keep her hair as a Sikh, because to her, thank you, that it just reminds people that the true beauty's inside. You know, you can have something that's dressed up really nice on the outside and have it be pretty bitter on the inside. So, but the reality is, you know, that, and different Sikhs handle this stuff in different ways. You know, believe me, there are some women, and Sikhs in our community, when someone cuts their hair and stuff, we don't shun them, we don't kick them out, we don't do anything like that. That's their choice, and it's between them and God. Even they'll tell you, though, what does a observant Sikh do? Observant Sikh doesn't cut their hair. I cut my hair for this reason.
The women wear turbans too?
They're not, it doesn't have the same mandate that it does for men, but many do to show their spirituality. More and more these days, women are wearing turbans. And they wear slightly different. It's more cylindrical, and oftentimes they may cover it with a chuni, with a light veil.
And Baisakhi is the major holiday?
Baisakhi is one of our major holidays. That is, and I'll tell the story of Baisakhi if we have time, but that is what we consider to be actually the birth of the Khalsa Panth, the Khalsa Brotherhood, where this became solidified as a Sikh's appearance and practice. And actually, I guess we might as well tell the story. In 1699, the Sikh community has been under the pressure and oppression from these emperors they were fighting for several years. And the community was getting fragmented, you know, people were taking their, you know, not keeping their appearance to avoid being killed. So at the spring festival time, which many Eastern faiths celebrate Baisakh or Vaisakhi or all these different things, Buddhists do too, Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Sikh Guru, called as many Sikhs together in Anandpur Sahib, which is up in northern India, that they could come. And he stood up to speak before the crowd. Everybody's very anxious to see him speak. Everybody's distraught. And he actually drew his sword and he said, you know, you can't be a Sikh unless you're willing to die for what you believe in. I need someone who's willing to come up here and give me their head. And exactly, people are going like this, Guru's been under too much pressure, you know, this is what's going on here. And he said it again, and he said it louder. He said, I want someone who really believes that they're a Sikh who's willing to die for what they believe in. And a person volunteered. Walked up, took him to the tent, heard a chop, came out with blood on the sword, and said, I need another. And people are starting to freak out and run away, figuring that's it, he's lost it totally, this is it. But time after time, for 5 times, 5 people volunteered. And as the 5th one went in, they all came out dressed in royal robes with their heads attached. And he simply said, this is the level of commitment you have to be a Sikh, to be spiritual. And then he actually went through a baptismal ceremony where he started stirring water, because baptism, water is a sign of rebirth, even to us, you know, as it is with Christians, as it is with many other practices. So he started stirring the water with a double-edged sword called a kunda in order to baptize these 5 Sikhs to represent the rebirth of the Khalsa in this new spirit. And his wife, Mata Sahibkar, comes up and basically says, all you guys talk about is war, and she puts some sugar in the water, and there has to be sweetness in life too. So he stirred that, and he baptized them, and we still use that same potion, that same mixture of water and sugar that's been stirred and prayed over and meditated on when we do what we call Amritsars. So this is a celebration of Vaisakhi, and it happened at springtime, usually around the 14th of April is when the actual day is. And it basically, in a way, it's kind of like the Sikh New Year, because the Sikh calendar then started from that point, in a way. And it's also a symbol of the whole birth of the concept of Khalsa, of Sikhism.
We went to the festival downtown.
Downtown? A lot of Sikhs, huh?
Very impressive. The convention center was full of colorful.
We get about 15,000.
Yeah, and the horses and the sword and you know, and the meal was a vegetarian meal there.
Yeah. Well, this is true. Sikhs, we talked about diet to begin with. Sikhs, most Sikhs or all Sikhs aren't necessarily vegetarians, but all the food we serve at Sikh temples is vegetarian. Why? Because anybody can eat it. It's kosher. For the most part, it's halal. It's, you know, anybody who comes there, if you're Hindu, it's vegetarian. Anybody can feel welcome to come and eat and not worry about violating their dietary restrictions. As a matter of fact, the Golden Temple we talked about, which is a very beautiful place. I mean, it was built over the years and built up as one of the holiest shrines in Sikhism. And it is actually, have anybody ever seen pictures of it?
Yes.
Okay. So that's marble and gold. It's actually gold. It's not brass. There's 92 kilos of gold plating on the outside. It's actually big silver sheets with heavy, heavy gold impressed on it. Anyway, a very beautiful place, but it's built very significantly. It's built with a door on each side on 4 ways, meaning all people from all 4 corners of the world are always welcome to come there. Again, we don't believe we got an exclusive on God. We believe that anybody who wants to come and meditate on God there, great, please come. You know, so that is that's an important part of Sikhism. We have 2 basic codes of conduct, or 2 basic ways to participate in life, and they're called Simran and Seva. Seva means selfless service. It means like a mitzvah if you're Jewish. It means like, you know, it means like you serve without expectation of return. That you serve humanity by feeding them, healing them, helping them. And Simran means always remember God. Always meditate on God with every breath if you can. Because that's what life can be best lived to us. You know, what better life is there if you're meditating on God all the time? For me, nothing, but other people may have other ideas. But all right, more questions. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I must have missed that one too. What is the prophet's name, or is there also an ongoing?
Oh, you missed that part.
Right now?
Sikhism was founded, we don't have a living guru. Sikhism was founded by 10 living gurus, 10 human gurus, and when the 10th one knew he was dying, he passed the leadership of the Sikhs to the Sikh scriptures, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So that's the leader of the Sikhs now. We believe this is, we treat it like a living teacher. When it's carried in respect over the head. It's, you know, it's woken up in the morning and put out on its throne or display. It's put to bed at night. So
we are not talking about the unique prophet like Muhammad or like Jesus.
we have 10 Sikh gurus. So we have 10 prophets, if you're going to make the analogy.
And the most sacred place is the Golden Temple?
The most sacred shrine. The most sacred place, we believe, is inside your own heart. That's why God is everywhere. So we don't have to, you know, we don't necessarily face, you know, any way or worry. You know, we believe we can find God anywhere at any time, in you and myself and all that. Yes.
How many Sikh temples are there in Los Angeles?
Greater Los Angeles area, last count, I think there's 14.
I don't know if there's an easy answer to this, but I'm just curious.
Good, I like those questions.
Our young people today, young Sikhs, living in a country like this where most people don't know what a Sikh is versus a Muslim or anyone else, in a competitive work environment, how are they dealing with the kind of discrimination they must feel when they go out to get jobs?
And they face. And it's not just the young people, it's people that come here from India. Many Sikhs are given the choice of keeping their religiously mandated appearance in their practice or feeding their family. But believe me, put on a turban and a beard. Unless you got letters like PhD after your name or some doctorate or some engineer, you won't get a job. Or they'll hire you and they'll tell you to shave and take that thing off your head so you don't freak the customers out. You know, including Disneyland. So it depends on the individual, really. It really does. You know, it's hard. You know, Sikh children are bullied in school. It's like Muslim children if they decide to cover at a young age and stuff. Treated very badly. And that's the learning curve America needs to go through. But the reality is, it does depend. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The reality is those that stand up for themselves inside and out, you know, it's a blessing for them. Because they know who they are. They don't have to get depressed and wonder about what life's about and who they are.
Which country is more tolerant towards religion? India or the United States?
Well, that's a funny story. In ways, India is, and in many large ways, India is not. Because there are more conflicts drawn on religious lines in India probably than anywhere else. You know, if a Muslim girl gets assaulted by a Hindu boy in this village, they don't go after the family, they go after all the Hindus. Same thing in the other way. That's just kind of the way the culture has grown there. And I would say in certain ways India is, because India is familiar. Sikhs are the backbone of India. They would have to accept them. The population of Sikhs in India is about 1.8%, but they're 40% of the military. And they're the vast majority of the money in the country. Thank you. The guy who owns, anybody know who Tata is, the company Tata? Anybody heard it?
That makes cars?
Yeah.
Well, they make everything in India. They started making, but now they own, if you own a Land Rover or Jaguar, you own an Indian company car. They bought Jaguar like 8 years ago now, and Land Rover. Sikh family. You know, most of the big money in India is in Sikh families. How are we doing time-wise?
Yeah, maybe one last question.
Yes.
I was going to ask about business, which you mentioned with Tata. Aren't Sikhs very business-oriented, like a lot of the Baniyas?
Yeah.
Especially Gujarat and all that, but they own a lot of businesses and they work professionally in a lot of businesses.
Yeah. No, just progressing prosperity is very important to us. Probably it's gotten out of hand to a certain degree because people spend more time doing that than spirituality, but that's when they start calling me to come lecture. Go ahead.
Are we done?
Yeah, no. Any other dying, burning questions that nobody got answered? This is basically just a light introduction. I encourage you all to go online, read more about Sikhs. Just type in S-I-K-H.
Where did you learn? In India? Did you,
Pardon me?
To study. Did you go to India for that, or?
No. I'm kind of a learn as I go type of guy always. You know, University of the Streets and all. So I learned a lot from my teacher, the yoga instructor, who actually we kind of held him up. He wanted to teach yoga. He didn't want to teach about Sikhism, but we made him. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.